Hello and welcome back to this Downfellow Idealistic Crusade. This video will be going over a couple new LPs for my vinyl record collection. I went to our local record convention that they've had a few times since the COVID outbreak started to back off a little bit and people have stopped quarantining as much. It's still held outdoors, and you still go out with masks and stuff, but at least it's a nice way to support some of the really awesome dealers that show up. And there are some great deals to be had. It's held outdoors at a they've rented several blocks of a flea market, and it's quite nice to go out on a Sunday for an hour or two and just peruse around. I didn't really find too much this time, but I found two really nice pieces, and then a couple other things from eBay and some local finds. But just some really nice titles, so I figured I would go ahead and make a video about it. Titles like this wonderful, excellent condition original stereo copy of John Barry Conducts His Great Movie Hits, which is one of the amazing 60s compilations of John Barry reorchestrating and conducting his own material. So adds new life to these classic bits. And this one in particular is one I've seen a number of times, but it's almost always, destroyed. So this will start out this video. So with that, let's go off to the table and take a closer look at all of these wonderful LPs. So we'll start off these highlights of the latest record convention and a random new finds, both from local and online purchases, with this really great condition copy of John Barry Conducts His Greatest Movie Hits, which is one of the really awesome mid-60s, in the midst of the Bond phenomena and spy craze, albums that were put together of John Barry material conducted by John Barry himself. This one, I think, maybe has the best cover of the 60s ones. This really nice, very dramatic black and white still of the man himself, looking uber dramatic as he always did. He had this real knack for making these really dramatic photo appearances for what would be printed on the album jackets. But what's really cool about these compilations, and often gets overlooked, is the fact that Barry himself was reorchestrating or doing re-recordings of these famous bits and materials. They weren't just compilations of the prior released songs and tracks. So that means there's actually a number of variations of certain Barry classic pieces of scoring, and there's also a number of actual John Barry orchestrated and composed versions of the James Bond theme itself. So if you've ever wondered why versions of the classic Bond theme have appeared that sound totally different, but do have the Barry iconography and style, it's because, well, actually he wound up doing multiple versions of them over time. And sadly, a lot of these are not on or available on CD or anywhere. You can find some via random YouTube uploads, but these particular score releases, there's one under the, I think it's John Barry Plays Goldfinger is one UA did. United Artists did a couple. This one is under Columbia that did two Barry compilations. And then there were a few more of these throughout the 60s and into the 70s. But particularly for Barry fans and James Bond fans, they are essential because they do have some really great tracks. And they also vary into Barry's other classic scores. Really nice cover here. Again, you never find these in shape like this. This is still mostly in the original shrink wrap, which I couldn't believe. And the condition of the LP is actually in really nice shape. Really nice, dramatic black and white still of Barry on the back. And I like the fact the notes are typed up in this sort of inner office memorandum type font with, obviously font as if it's from an actual typewriter. So again, it adds to the sort of promo feel that this release has. Now, this did have a mono and a stereo release, just like the other Columbia released Barry compilation around the same time period. So, of course, if you're a completist like myself, you will wind up wanting both the mono and stereo versions. But I'm pretty sure the monos are a fold down because these would be full-on stereo recordings. What really cracked me up is this still has the original store sticker on it from a local store that's still around, Nashville's The Great Escape. But as you can see, in 1983, this particular LP would have only cost you a mere $2.49. Oh, what happened to 1980s vinyl prices? Let me show you the label. Of course, this is on the classic original 2i stereo Columbia label. Again, just from the label condition alone, you can tell this is in really nice shape. It was graded at the show as just a very good plus, but it's definitely the cleanest copy I have ever come across of this particular LP. I've almost bought this before a number of times, but again, the condition has always been so poor that I just wanted to hold out until there was one that didn't have tons of groove wear and things, because that's what you're mostly going to find with 60s vintage score and soundtrack releases is groove wear is going to run rampant because a lot of soundtracks were, of course, put on as background music or party music or mood music. And on old turntables of the day with heavier tracking needles, that's, of course, the first thing that's going to pop up. So this was a really cool find. Wasn't seeing a lot of stuff at the local record convention this time around, but then something always grabs my eye. And then I saw this and I saw it still had most of the shrink wrap still on. And then when I saw how clean this was, I was like, yes, it's good that I came here this time. And then the other LP I picked up at the local convention is this lovely condition original US Polydor pressing of the 1979 Quadrophenia soundtrack, which of course is the original Who songs, but the soundtrack versions made for the film adaptation of the 1973 classic landmark album Quadrophenia. Of course, diehard Who fans will already be well aware that the actual songs as used in the film are slightly different mixes, so this is really a companion piece to the original album. I myself enjoyed the film and enjoyed the versions I heard in the film, but I am a diehard, tried and true fan of the original album. So I've never actually owned the original LP of this before, and for some reason, it's seemingly hard to track this down without a $20 and up price tag on it. Why, I'm not exactly sure. It is more of a diehard Who fan piece to pick up. But I finally found this nice copy. The cover has a little bit of wear on the side, but outside of that, the LPs themselves are pristine, and the cover's in much nicer shape than I usually find it. And you will want to find this without cover damage because the actual cover image is, of course, excellent. And it's a really nice gatefold, too. So here's a shot of the rear. And of course, it's Polydor, which would lead you to think that this is a UK album, but it is actually, Polydor handled the US pressings as well as the UK ones. Of course, the other thing to note about this particular album release, it was supervised by John Entwistle himself. So, in that respect, it is very much akin to him supervising the Odds and Sods B-Sides and Rarities compilation that also came out in the 1970s. So, it really more in the fact that he supervised the mixes and the compilation of the actual album itself. So obviously it would be a little bit different had they been done by Pete Townsend or Roger Daltrey, or more of the band had actually been involved in the album preparation process. So let me show you the gatefold. It's a really nice cast shot from the film, and it's completely using up both panels, which is really a nice touch, I think. Then you've got nice custom inners. It's a little bit of creasing on them, but they're otherwise in perfectly fine shape. And again, it was just nice to finally find a clean copy of this that didn't cost over $20 for some reason. And then, uncommon for a Who release, they did actually make custom labels for this. And I say uncommon because, of course, the Who, especially in the US, were just using the normal studio labels. But this being under the Who Productions banner, because, of course, they produced the film, obviously it does make sense that the labels had a little bit, of a spiffier art design to them. And here's the reverse with the Polydor logo on the bottom. These are cut at the mastering lab because they have the trademark TML-M stampers in the dead wax. Here is the second inner sleeve. And then, very fittingly, the last photo on the second sleeve is, of course, a shot of Thunderfingers, the Ox himself, since, of course, he did produce this particular soundtrack release. So, of course, on record 2 for the first label, you have a version of the classic Target logo, which seems tailor-made for an LP. And then the actual track listing is on this same custom white Quadrophenia label. So this is really it's still an essential Who album, even though it's not technically one of the studio albums, but it has enough material and enough new stuff that really does make it essential. And like Odds and Sods, it was produced and compiled by John Entwistle himself, so that really helps keep it band-centric and focused, and thus essential for any Who collection. This next one is a custom release that was made from the Diggers Factory website. This is the first album from the band Minus Light, which I know of because it's a duo, one of which is Mad Maxine, the Laserdisc Queen, or Maxine Davlin as we know her, from the wonderful Laserdisc Wolfpack podcast. So this is her band, and this was their first album, if I'm understanding it correctly. And it was always a dream of theirs to get a vinyl release. So they put this together, and Diggers Factory is a site where you can get your own records created, but you have to drum up X number of people who are willing to pay for said release. So this one was a limited run of 100 LPs. They were able to get 100 of us to sign up and agree to chip in and get a copy of this. So this is it's a cool idea for those who are looking to get their own records pressed. So really nice cover art, and I have to say the actual pressing quality is quite impressive. I didn't know where, I still don't know exactly where it is pressed, but I had no idea what to expect in terms of the actual pressing quality when this got here. But I have to admit the pressing quality and the printing quality on the jacket is quite impressive for a essentially self-made release by a company. As you can see here, it's got the hand numbering. This is number 84 out of 100. So once these are gone, obviously they're gone. And but it's such a cool idea, and I was so happy to support a friend of this channel, Maxine, who is one of the great people on the Laserdisc Wolfpack podcast. The labels themselves just replicate the rear cover image, but I have to admit there is a little weight to this. It's a little heavier than your standard 120 gram. It's not quite 180 gram weight or thickness, but it's got some weight to it. I'd say it's definitely at least maybe 140 or 150. I guess I should really invest in a scale to actually weigh records when they come in. But again, I was very, very pleasantly surprised at the pressing quality, and that this is nice and sturdy, and it's got a little weight to it. The Airbox just has basic inscription numbers. So again, I have no idea as where this was pressed, but I was very surprised because again, I had no idea what this was going to be like in terms of pressing quality when it got here. So this is another one of my just going into the local store, flipping through the bins and going, holy crap, how is this here? This, of course, is the original UK first pressing of Roxy Music's album Stranded. This is actually the second time I've come across a UK Roxy original pressing in the same local shop. I don't know what it is about sometimes going to this particular store, but I've found now two original UK Pink Rim Island label Roxy albums and a couple other really amazingly great condition original UK pressings of classic albums just in the regular bins and not on the rare release wall or anything. So I'm like, I am not second guessing this. So I don't know if maybe it's somebody who's just getting rid of their collection one album at a time, but this is in exceptional shape. It still has on the iconic jacket, it's got a very thick high gloss on here. It took me a while to peel off the price stickers. I was so afraid that they were going to remove some of that because it is a very thick high gloss. I don't know how much this is going to come across, but see if I can get some reflection on here. Yeah, you don't see a whole lot, but it is one. It got some of the best gloss I've ever seen on a vintage record sleeve, and again, it just is immaculate looking. Let me show you the rear, which of course is continuing the great art. There's a little bit of wear on the back, which is understandable. I'm just amazed this is in as good shape as it is. And of course, there is a gatefold for the single LP. So you get the great band shot, which then continues over onto the second panel of the gatefold. Now, of course, with it being a British band, I do try to seek out original UK issues for Roxy Music and most British bands. By the time you get to their later albums, the final couple albums did get Bob Ludwig mastering here in the U.S., and they sound great on their U.S. pressings. Avalon, a lot of people like the RL version. Some people like the UK pressing. I would like to get a copy of both, but I know on the earlier albums, the UK ones are generally the ones to go for, but they definitely don't pop up, and certainly not for usual cheap LP pricing. So again, this was really a steal of a find. I still can't believe they had it as priced as low as they did, because you don't even see the American pressings of Roxy albums, particularly the earlier ones. And here it is. This is what you want to see with Roxy Music in particular. The original Pink Rim Island label found only on the original UK copies. Again, this is just an incredible find to just walk into a store and be able to pick up something like this. Even with our current 2021 vinyl pricing, it's just insane. I do occasionally look around on eBay and other places for trying to find some of the other Roxy albums in their UK Pink Rim Island editions, and they definitely don't go for the $20 to $25 that I paid for this. So they certainly go for a lot more. So again, I'm just completely shocked to just find this in the local store, and hopefully I can complete the run of at least the first albums on UK editions. Of course, the one I really want to find most is their second album, For Your Pleasure, which is probably my favorite Roxy album start to finish. But I would like to complete the whole run someday and get the later albums on their US RL pressings as well as UK versions to do a nice comparison shootout. And then last but certainly not least, this was another local find. This is the 2015 Record Store Day custom repressing of the iconic first album from George Thorogood and the Destroyers. But the interesting thing here is this is actually a custom mix and reissue done originally expressly for Record Store Day and then pressed to vinyl. This is it's kind of got a back history to it, but of course the original Destroyers album was their debut album. It's a very pretty much giving you the representation of what their live act was at the time. It's very tight. It's a phenomenal first album and totally different from the typical sound people think of by the later era of their more popular hits. Like, of course, everybody thinks of Bad to the Bone. Well, this is really it's the first inkling of what that sound would eventually build up to, but without any of that bigness. The first couple Thorogood albums are really essential, I think. But what's really interesting about this, what I didn't know until they announced this, was originally it was recorded as the original three-piece band lineup, but eventually afterwards they had added a bassist post-recording and then went in and overdubbed bass parts onto the various album tracks, and that's the album we know. So for the anniversary and doing a custom release, they commissioned a brand new mix from the original session tapes. It basically gives you the original, more raw presentation without the bass parts that we know from the original release. So this is known as the bassless version of the album. It removes two of the acoustic songs from the original album, so it doesn't have every last track from the original LP, but it does add a bonus track as well, and it's a really interesting experience listening to the album this way, which does have some iconic tracks on it. So it's a really cool piece to have, and stupidly I missed out on it back. I think this came out in 2015, originally for Record Store Day, and then it started drying up in terms of being able to get a copy. So it looked like I would check every once in a while on Discogs and stuff, and costs were starting to shoot up there. And then lo and behold, somebody traded in their copy. So I was very happy to pick this up. The jacket art looks really nice, and it does have a custom name. They added the Delaware Destroyers, which I suppose was the original band name, if I'm not mistaken, and that's how you're able to distinguish this from the original album, which is one of my all-time top recommendations for great LPs to pick up when you're starting a collection, because it's a great album. So this is a really fantastic companion piece and one of the coolest things that somebody has come up with for a custom RSD release. Now here's the rear, and I like the simple design. Here they have a nice vintage bit of blurb, and then the blurb here is actually explaining what this release is and the notion of the bassless mix that you're going to hear. It also talks about it removes the two acoustic songs from the original album and includes the bonus tracks. So you are getting some new material, which was a nice touch. And then for the other nice touch of this release, not only is the actual LP heavier than standard weight, but it is pressed on a really nice shade of blue vinyl. It's got a little bit of a sheen to it. Again, on camera, it's probably going to come across looking a lot flatter, but it's just a cool thing to make this really stand out a little bit more. Sound quality, the actual pressing quality wise, it sounds quite nice, and I'm so happy to finally have this. Again, I should have gotten it years ago, and then it just kind of dried up. So it's still rather tough to get. You can find a copy occasionally more around the original $25 price, but usually you're stuck buying a copy on eBay or Discogs for usually about double that price, and they're only going up further and further. In terms of the mix itself, it's a really cool variation. Do I like it better than the original? No, probably not, because again, the bass is really nice on the original. I like the bass parts. I like what they did with the mix, and I'm so used to that it's still a bit weird hearing it this way. But this is a raw presentation. It is. I mean, it is essentially what you've heard before, but in a different package because it doesn't have the overdub bass parts. It is thus a bit more naked and again that feeling of rawness comes through. So it's a different listening experience, and you get the really nice bonus track. So it is a bit weird, and it definitely gives it a bit of an edge hearing the classic version of well, their classic song really of one bourbon, one scotch, and one beer, which should be a late night radio staple everywhere, and it unfortunately isn't. So again, I do love the original album, but this is a really cool variation and totally worth it if you stumble across it. If you've never heard this record ever in your life, and you're a rock fan at all, definitely check it out. It's an essential album. But I'm so glad to finally have the alternative mix version on wax. So that is it for this particular video. Again, not too terribly much, but some really amazing LPs to come across. This one in particular was in really nice shape, so I was very happy to finally pick up an original 2i Columbia stereo copy. But particularly that copy of Stranded, an original Roxy Music UK Pink Rim Island label copy, is not something you find sitting in the bins. And this now marks the second time I've found one of those original UK Roxy Music albums in a local store in the bins at a non-crazy price. So it just goes to show you that stuff is out there. You just have to actually start and go digging. And even though I didn't find too much of the convention this time around, I did finally find two particular albums, the Barry album and the Quadrophenia soundtrack, that I had been trying to get for some time, but was just holding out for excellent condition because, particularly on the Quadrophenia soundtrack, for some reason, everybody wants to charge 20 or 30 bucks for it because it's a double album, and regardless of condition. So I usually see pretty beat copies that are now marked way overpriced. So I was very happy to finally get that copy for under 10 bucks, and it's got a little wear on the opening of the gatefold, but other than that, it's absolutely perfect. So with that, I want to thank you ever so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, learned some new information, or found out about some titles that you may want to possibly add to your own collection, or at least add to your never-ending Discogs want list. So as always, keep physical media alive, keep your turntables spinning, and enjoy the music.